The mountain settlement of Coldwater, Colorado, was not the kind of place where a woman could keep land without a husband. Charlotte Brigham had learned this the hard way. Her father had died in the spring, leaving her 60 acres of valley bottom, a cabin that needed a new roof, and a letter from the Territorial Land Office stating that unmarried women could not hold claim without a male cosigner. She had 3 weeks to find a husband or lose everything. She had been engaged once, to a man who had left her for a woman with prettier hair and a richer father. She was not interested in love. She was interested in survival. She had watched the men of Coldwater for 2 weeks, measuring them, dismissing them one by one. The storekeeper was married. The blacksmith was cruel. The miners were drunk more often than they were sober. And then there was Nathan Westbrook. He was not from Coldwater. He had come from somewhere east, bought the old Henderson place, and kept to himself for 3 years. He was quiet, steady, the kind of man who fixed what was broken and asked nothing in return. He was also the only man in town who had never looked at her with hunger in his eyes. She decided he was perfect. She found him at the feed store on a Thursday afternoon, loading sacks of grain onto his wagon. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with hands that looked like they had worked every day of his life, and a face that might have been handsome if it smiled more often. She walked up to him without preamble, without the small talk that women were supposed to use. "I need to marry someone by Friday. I've been watching you. You don't talk much, and you don't seem to want anything from anyone. That makes you the safest option." He stared at her, a sack of grain suspended in his arms, and said nothing. She waited for him to laugh, to shake his head, to tell her she was out of her mind. Instead, he set down the sack and looked at her with those steady, unreadable eyes. "Why me?" She had prepared for this question. "Because you're not from here. You don't have family to answer to. You don't have a reputation to protect. You live on your land, I live on mine. We sign the papers. We go back to our lives, and in 6 months, we divorce. Clean. Simple. No feelings involved." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "All right." She had not expected him to agree so quickly. She stood there, her carefully prepared arguments dying on her lips, and tried to read his face. There was nothing there. No amusement, no calculation, no hidden motive. Just the same quiet steadiness that had made her choose him in the first place. "All right," she repeated. He nodded, picking up the sack of grain again. "I'll be at the preacher's at noon on Friday. Don't be late." He walked away, leaving her standing in the middle of the feed store, wondering if she had just made the best decision of her life or the worst. The ceremony was brief and empty. The preacher read the words, they signed the papers, and Charlotte became a married woman without ever having been a bride. Nathan stood beside her, his face as unreadable as it had been at the feed store. And when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, he shook her hand as if closing a business deal. She walked out of the church alone, the marriage certificate folded in her pocket, and told herself that this was exactly what she had wanted. No feelings, no complications, just a name on a piece of paper that would save her land. She did not see him for 2 weeks. He did not come to her cabin. He did not send word. He went back to his life, and she went back to hers. And the town of Coldwater whispered about the strange marriage that no one had seen coming. Charlotte did not care. She had what she needed. She spent her days mending the cabin, tending her father's garden, learning to do the things her father had always done. She told herself she was fine. She told herself she was content. She told herself she did not notice that the nights were getting longer and the air was getting colder. The first snow came in October, a week earlier than anyone had expected. Charlotte woke to a world painted white, her windows frozen shut, her chimney smoking in the wind. She had cut wood for the winter, but she had not cut enough. She had not expected the cold to come so fast, to bite so deep. She sat by her fire, feeding it pieces of wood that disappeared too quickly, and watched the snow pile against her door. She thought about Nathan, about his quiet hands and his unreadable face. She thought about the woodpile she had seen behind his cabin, stacked high and neat, and she hated herself for thinking about him at all. The knock came on the third day of the storm. She opened the door to find Nathan standing in the snow, a load of wood on his shoulder, his coat white with frost. He did not ask to come in. He did not ask if she was all right. He simply set the wood down by her door, split the logs into pieces that would fit her stove, and stacked them on her porch. She stood in the doorway, watching him, and when he was finished, he looked at her and said, "You didn't cut enough." It was not a question. She did not answer. He came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Each time, he brought wood. Each time, he stacked it on her porch without being asked. She did not thank him. She did not know how. She stood in her doorway, wrapped in her father's old coat, and watched him work. He never stayed longer than necessary. He never looked at her in a way that made her feel watched. He simply appeared, did what needed to be done, and left. And slowly, without meaning to, she began to wait for him. The storm broke on the fifth day, and the sun came out, and Charlotte walked to his cabin for the first time. She found him on his porch, mending a harness, his hands moving with the same steady rhythm she had seen at the feed store. He looked up when she came through the gate, and she saw something flicker in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or something else she could not name. "I never thanked you," she said. He nodded, turning back to his work. "You didn't need to." She stood there, awkward, uncomfortable, and then she did something she had not expected to do. She sat down on the step beside him. They sat in silence for a long time, the sun warming the snow, the valley stretching out below them. She did not know why she had come. She did not know why she was staying. She only knew that her cabin felt empty in a way it had not felt before, and that the silence here with him was different. He was the first to speak. "Why did you choose me?" She looked at him, surprised. "I told you. You were safe." He smiled then, a small thing barely a curve of his lips, but it changed his face entirely. "Safe," he repeated. She looked away. "I didn't want complications." He was quiet for a moment, and then he said something that made her breath catch. "What if I want complications?" She turned to look at him, and for the first time, she saw something behind his eyes that was not steady, not unreadable. It was hunger. Not for her body, she had seen that look before, and this was different. It was hunger for her company, her words, her presence. She opened her mouth to say something sharp, something to push him away, but the words would not come. She sat there, frozen, and he waited. She did not go back to her cabin that night. She stayed on his porch until the sun set and the stars came out, and when the cold began to bite, he stood and offered her his hand. She took it. He led her inside to a cabin that was smaller than hers, but warmer, a fire already burning in the hearth, a pot of stew simmering on the stove. He poured her coffee, cut her bread, sat across from her at a table that was too small for two. They ate in silence, but it was not the silence of strangers anymore. It was the silence of two people who were learning to share a space. She went home the next morning, but she came back the day after and the day after that. They fell into a rhythm, an unspoken agreement that did not need words. She brought eggs from her chickens. He made bread. She mended his shirts. He fixed her fence. They worked side by side, ate together, sat on his porch as the days grew shorter and the nights grew longer. The town of Coldwater watched and whispered, but Charlotte did not care. She had stopped pretending that this was just a marriage of convenience. She had stopped pretending that she felt nothing. The moment came on a night when the cold was so deep that the walls groaned and the fire burned low. She had stayed too late, and the snow had begun again, and the path to her cabin was buried. She sat by his fire, wrapped in his blanket, watching him build up the flames. "I should go," she said, but she did not move. He did not answer. He finished with the fire and sat across from her, his face half in shadow. "You don't have to," he said. She looked at him, and her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. She stayed. He gave her his bed and slept on the floor by the fire, the same way he had done when she first came. She lay in the darkness, listening to his breathing, and she thought about the man she had married for convenience. She thought about his quiet hands and his steady eyes, about the wood he had stacked on her porch without being asked, about the bread he had cut for her, the coffee he had poured. She thought about the walls she had built around her heart, walls that had kept her safe for years. And she knew, lying there in his bed, that those walls were gone. She found him in the kitchen the next morning, making coffee, his hair rumpled, his shirt untucked. He looked younger in the morning light, softer, the mask he wore for the world set aside. She stood in the doorway, watching him, and he must have felt her gaze because he turned and looked at her. "Charlotte," he said, and her name in his mouth was different than she had ever heard it. She crossed the room without thinking, without planning, without any of the careful calculations that had governed her life for as long as she could remember. She stopped in front of him, close enough to touch, close enough to see the pulse beating in his throat. She reached up and put her hand on his face, and he closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a man starved for something he had not allowed himself to want. "I married you because you were safe," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Because I didn't want to feel anything. Because I thought I could control it." He opened his eyes, and they were not steady anymore. They were the same eyes she had seen that first day at the feed store, but now she understood what was behind them. "And now?" he asked. She smiled, and it was the first real smile she had given anyone in years. "Now I don't want to control it." He kissed her then, gentle at first, as if she might break, and then deeper, as if he had been waiting for this moment for longer than he knew. She kissed him back, and in that kiss, she felt everything she'd been running from: hope, fear, the terrifying possibility of being known. When they finally pulled apart, his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her face, he spoke the words that changed everything. "I didn't marry you because you were safe. I married you because I saw you in that feed store, and you were the bravest thing I had ever seen. I married you because I wanted to be near you. I married you because I was already in love with you." She stared at him, and the tears she had been holding back for years finally fell. She had asked him to pretend to be her husband. She had made rules, built walls, told herself she did not need anyone. But standing there, in his kitchen, with his arms around her and his heart beating against hers, she knew the truth. The marriage had been pretend, but the love was the realest thing she had ever known. They stayed in Coldwater. They kept the land, both hers and his, and built a life that was neither convenience nor arrangement. The town forgot that their marriage had started as a lie, because what grew between them was the truest thing in the territory. And on the nights when the snow piled high and the wind screamed against the windows, Charlotte would look across the room at the quiet man who had agreed to marry her before she finished asking, and she would smile. She had wanted safety. She had found something far more dangerous. She had found home.